Vienna Pharaon, you're a marriage and family therapist, and your recent book, The Origins of You, a bestseller in the US, recently translated into Romanian and published by Trei, is meant to help readers to heal wounds that originated in their family systems. The Origins of You, How Breaking Family Patterns Can Liberate the Way We Live and Love, is your first book, and you bring here your professional experience, and as you have practiced therapy for 15 years, but you also reveal some pieces of your personal history with your origin wound. What kind of wound did you carry, and how did you manage to heal, to resolve your original wound?
Yeah, the two wounds that resonated most deeply for me were the worthiness wound and the safety wound. When I was a little girl, around 5, 6 years old, my parents started their separation process, divorce process, which took 9 years to complete. And I am an only child. So as this tiny little human watching the two adults in my life really crash and burn, there was a lot of psychological abuse, manipulation, paranoia, emotional flooding. It was just a very chaotic environment with the two of them fighting in the way that they did. And I was this little girl who was watching these two people I loved and cared about not well, they were, it looked to me as if they were crashing and burning. And so one of the things when I reflected back on my childhood was realizing how much I had, quote unquote, flown under the radar, meaning I didn't want to add any additional difficulty or trouble to an environment that was already deeply troubled. And so I pretended like I was fine. I pretended like I was okay. I pretended like I was unaffected by things. My, emotional safety and, psychological safety was really, I self-protected by pretending like all was okay. And so this needless little girl turned into a needless adult, a needless woman, who in my mid to late 20s continued to present this way. And I remember there was one moment when I was dating someone where I realized that I had continued the role from my childhood, right? That I presented in my romantic relationships, pretending like I was fine with everything. I was the cool girl. I thought I needed to be unaffected by anything in order to keep love, in order to be chosen. And I think a lot of people can identify this, where it's like, who do I need to be, right? How do I need to show up so that people don't leave? What do I need to do? In what way do I need to perform? Yeah, go ahead.
And what did you change in order to heal that wound?
Yeah, it was important for me to realize that role had come along with me. And at a point where I started to say, you know what? I'm not actually okay. I'm not fine with the things that you're doing. And it required me to really step into my authenticity. It required me to actually begin to set boundaries. It required me to start to have a relationship with myself, right? Because everything else was around caretaking, protecting other people so that I would protect myself from them leaving. But I got to a point where I started to actually have a relationship with myself that said, actually, I'm not okay with this, or actually, this isn't fine, or actually, I am hurt, or I don't feel respected. And it felt like a really brave step. I think for anybody who has said that they are fine and unaffected, to then say that you are not fine and you are affected is a really big shift in someone's life, because you put yourself face to face with an outcome that you are afraid of, right? People leaving, a relationship ending, somebody being disappointed with you. And I needed to face those things in order to actually step into, we can call it my truth or my authenticity, but I needed to do those things in order to start to live a much freer life.
Mm-hmm. In order to understand our wounds, awareness is the first step, naming that wound. But is awareness in itself enough for healing? If not, which will be the other steps for wounded people in order to grow and to free themselves from the burdens of the past?
Yeah, naming is great, right? The awareness that like, oh, I actually have something in my history that has caused some type of pain. And it doesn't have to be trauma. It doesn't have to be some, I think sometimes people get lost or oh, somebody else's story is way worse than mine, or I had a pretty good childhood. I don't want to point the finger at someone. We all have wounds, right? We all experience disappointment. There's a wide range here. And so, yes, awareness and naming is the first place, but we must witness our pain and we must grieve our pain in order to move it. Right. And so I walk the reader through a 4-step healing process, which starts with the identification, like you said, the awareness, the naming of the wound, then requires us to witness, right? To bear witness to ourselves, right? To see the pain, to remember the moments, right? To acknowledge and honor what happened without needing to minimize it, without needing to compare it to somebody else's story. And then it's the grief. The third part of this is the authentic expression of emotion that looks lots of different ways. But when we're actually honoring our pain, right, then whatever the natural emotion that is there, it's going to surface, it's going to come forward. And then the 4th step is the pivot. And this is the place between, I think, or many people are familiar with a quote that is attributed to Victor Frankl, which is, between stimulus and response, there is a space, right? And in that space, it is our opportunity for freedom. When we name and we witness and we grieve, we open that space a bit further. It gives us an opportunity to choose something different, to choose a pattern that we engage with slightly differently than we have before, right? Because the old patterns, they keep us in the wound, right? They keep us in the cycle. When we make the pivot, right, that is what allows us to live differently or partner differently and change those patterns for the better.
In your book, you name several types of emotional wounds caused by the loss of trust, safety, or self-esteem during childhood. Those wounds limit our lives, as you already said, but paradoxically, they also bring us benefits sometimes. Which will be the benefits of living with these origin wounds and not trying to heal them?
One of my friends and colleagues says that our pain and our gifts are next door neighbors. Right? Meaning, right, that we have a story, right? We have the wounds. And when we go through hardship, right, there's a part of us that when we survive it, right, we become perfectionists, or we become very detail focused because of our hypervigilance. We become, there's these gifts, right, that rise to the top. And I think the misconception is that if you heal, you will lose your gift. It doesn't happen, right? We can still hold the gift, whatever the gift is, right? Because a lot of people will say, this, right? I am who I am because of what happened. I wouldn't be who I am today if this didn't happen, right? So we understand that, of course, none of us would be who we are today if we didn't live the story that we lived. As what sometimes we kind of protect it in that way. And what I'm offering is that we can honor our pain. We can see the gifts that we have accumulated from that pain. But instead of the gift being pain-driven, instead of the gift being trauma-driven, it can be driven by our healing. It can be driven, it can still remain, even if we acknowledge and honor what it is that we went through.
The last question will be more personal. In The Origins of You, you mentioned how the fear of not letting people down transforms us into people pleasers. And you tell your readers how this pattern burdened, to a certain extent, your own life. And my question will be, how many people did you have to disappoint in order to stop that pattern and regain freedom in your relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are many small disappointments that still happen, because when you are living connected to yourself and what works for you, what aligns for you. I am a fairly new mother too. I have a 2-year-old, and they often say that when you're a parent, your yes and your no gets clearer, right? Because you have to set those boundaries, or you can't just please everyone because you have so many things that you're juggling. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that along the way, probably a handful of people, but I have done a really good job of keeping people in my life close to me who behave and operate in the same way, where we can respect each other's yeses and nos, where it feels respectful and honorable to make decisions that are actually connected to what I really want to do, or what works for me, or what doesn't work for me. And so it's frightening. There's a line from one of my favorite poems, The Invitation by Oriah, that says, I want to know if you can disappoint another to stay true to yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's a profound question, right? Because so many of us exist in the world trying to please, trying not to let people down, because as long as I don't do that, then I have safety, or I have connection, or somebody cares about me, or somebody loves me, or I feel like I'm a part of something. But when you are constantly letting yourself down in exchange for not letting someone else down, you are in a persistent and consistent rupture with your relationship with your own self. And I think that's a very important relationship to restore, even if it means that other people will be upset by it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Thank you, Vienna Pharaon, for advising us, and also for your illuminating book, The Origins of You, How Breaking Family Patterns Can Liberate the Way We Live and Love, whose translation was recently released at Trei in Romania. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, Victor.